My name is Adam Ellison, and I've never really believed in ghosts. Creepy stuff. Sure, true crime, absolutely. But actual hauntings, that always seemed like the kind of thing people exaggerate on YouTube to rack up views. I moved into this apartment about 6 months ago. It was my first time living alone. I'd just finished my degree and landed a remote IT job that paid decent enough for me to afford a small studio in a mid-century building just outside the city. The rent was suspiciously cheap, but the place was clean. The view was decent, and I was eager to get away from roommates. The apartment came mostly unfurnished, except for a single armchair in the corner of the main room, old and stained. But nothing I hadn't seen before in old buildings. I didn't think much of it. I moved it into the hallway the next morning, planning to haul it to the curb eventually. Things were fine for the first 2 weeks. And then, one night, I woke up to find the armchair had been brought back inside. It was sitting in the same spot I'd found it, corner of the main room, angled just slightly toward my bed. I remember jolting upright, disoriented. I live alone. My doors had been locked. My windows, too. I stared at the chair for a long while, heart racing in my throat, before I finally got up and checked every possible point of entry. Nothing was broken. No signs of forced entry. I even checked the hallway, wondering if maybe the maintenance guy had dragged it back in for some reason. But the hallway was dark and empty. I told myself I was just tired. Maybe I'd never actually taken it out, or maybe I'd moved it and forgot. I pushed the chair back out into the hall and wedged a doorstop against the inside of the door that night. I even left my phone's voice recorder on while I slept, something I'd seen in a Reddit thread once. Nothing happened for a few nights, but then, on the 5th night, the doorstop was nudged halfway across the room, and the chair was back. This time, it was sitting closer, just at the edge of the kitchen tile, still facing my bed. The worst part, the apartment smelled like shampoo. A strong, synthetic, floral kind. The kind I hadn't used since childhood. The kind my aunt used to keep in her guest bathroom. I started to wonder if someone had a spare key. Maybe the landlord, a maintenance worker. I called the leasing office the next morning, trying to stay calm. They assured me only one key existed, and it was in my possession. I asked if a previous tenant might still have one, and they told me the last person who'd lived there had been evicted 6 months prior and had returned all their keys. They even sent me a scanned document with the signed return slip. No one else had access. That night, I left a small pile of baking flour in front of the door. I woke up to find the door completely clean. Not a single footprint, but there was a cup of water sitting on my kitchen counter that I hadn't placed there. Room temperature. No condensation. Like it had been there all night. The chair, again, was back in the corner. Exactly as before. I moved it back to the hall and bought a new deadbolt lock from Home Depot. Spent an hour screwing it in. It made me feel safe for maybe a day, 2, at most. Then I started to notice the subtle things. My toothbrush was wet before I used it. My TV's input was changed to HDMI to I don't even have anything plugged into HDMI 2.1 morning. I woke up and all the picture frames I'd hung had been turned upside down. Still on the wall, just inverted, perfectly aligned. I didn't tell anyone at first. I knew how it would sound. Hey, someone's sneaking into my apartment at night and doing absolutely nothing except moving my chair and turning around my frames. Yeah, no one would take that seriously. But then, one afternoon, I came home from a walk and saw the door to my place slightly ajar. I froze. It was maybe an inch open. I could see the chain lock dangling like it had been unhooked. Just seconds before, I waited outside. Dialed 911. Told them I thought there was a break-in. The cops showed up 10 minutes later, walked through the apartment with me. Nothing was missing. Nothing broken. The officer asked if I was sure I hadn't left the door open myself. I could tell he didn't believe me. But here's the thing. When I checked the hallway afterward, the old armchair was gone, vanished, and in its place, taped to the wall, was a Polaroid. The picture was of me, sleeping, taken from across the room. Same angle where the chair usually sat. I moved out 2 days later. Slept on a friend's couch while I found a new place. Didn't care about breaking the lease. I couldn't stay there another night. Before I left, though, I gave in to curiosity and did some digging. Went down to the local county records office and pulled the eviction notice from the previous tenant. His name was Nathan R. Burke. I looked him up. Obituary popped up within seconds. He died 7 months ago, just a week after the eviction. Suicide. Found in his car 3 towns over. No note. But the article mentioned something that made my skin crawl. He told a coworker that he couldn't sleep in that apartment anymore because he felt like he was being watched. From the corner of the room, every night, they never found any drugs or alcohol in his system. But they did find over 40 photographs in his car, every one of a stranger sleeping. Asterisk, my name is Darren. And when I tell people what happened to me during the winter, I moved into that apartment on Ridgeway Avenue, Most either laugh nervously or assume I'm delusional. Maybe I would too if I hadn't lived through it. But I know what I found. I know what I saw. And I know it wasn't just some prank or elaborate coincidence. Something wanted me there. Or maybe something knew I would be. I moved in during the first snow of December. The apartment was on the second floor of an old red brick building that had probably seen better decades. The rent was oddly cheap for how spacious it was. 1 bedroom, decent kitchen, big living room with a single antique cabinet that the landlord said was built in and couldn't be moved. I didn't care. I just needed a place fast, and this one was clean, warm, and available. The first few nights were uneventful. Just the usual city sounds outside, the humming of the old radiator, and a bit of creaking in the ceiling when the neighbor upstairs paced at night. I kept to myself, spent most evenings reading or working on freelance design gigs, but around. The 5th night, I started feeling off. It began with a dream. I saw myself walking into my own apartment, only everything was slightly wrong. The walls were a deeper shade, the windows were bricked over, and all the furniture was covered in sheets. I walked toward the antique cabinet, the only piece that seemed familiar, and as I reached out to open it, a loud knocking woke me up. The knocking was real. 3 slow, deliberate thuds on my front door. I stumbled out of bed and peeked through the peephole, but the hallway was empty. No footsteps, no creaking stairs, just silence. I told myself it was probably a prank, maybe kids in the building. The next morning, while rearranging some boxes, I decided to finally check the cabinet. The doors were warped slightly, as if they hadn't been opened in years. Inside was mostly dust and some spiderwebs, but tucked behind a bottom drawer, there was a thin envelope, yellowed, brittle, with a wax seal that had partially flaked off. It had my full name on it. Darren Michael Cobb. I froze. The handwriting was in this strange cursive, sharp and fluid, like something from a different century. My first instinct was that it had been left by mistake, maybe a previous tenant with the same name. But when I turned it over and looked at the back corner, I saw the date, December 2nd, 2021, exactly 2 years before I moved in. I didn't open it right away. I just sat there on the couch, staring at the envelope, my mind racing with possibilities. I even searched the building's leasing records online, trying to find out if there had ever been another tenant with my name. Nothing. That night, that dream returned. Same scene, same brick-tin windows, but this time, as I approached the cabinet, I could hear whispering behind it, unintelligible but urgent. Like dozens of voices speaking all at once. I woke up with the envelope still in my hand. Finally, I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of faded stationery. The handwriting matched the front of the envelope. It said, "Darren, if you're reading this, then you've chosen to live here. You'll begin to notice things soon. Lights flickering, reflections that don't match, voices in the quiet. Don't ignore them. Don't move the cabinet. And whatever you do, never answer the door after 3 a.m., even if it sounds like me. You'll want to leave. You won't be able to. The apartment remembers you. D." I read it 3 times. My chest tightened with every word, even if it sounds like me. Who the hell wrote this? I checked the entire cabinet again, thinking maybe there was a second note or a hidden compartment. Nothing, just dust and the faint smell of something old, like dried flowers or mold. That same night, Kala, the power went out at exactly 3:03 a.m. The radiator hissed and went dead. My phone wouldn't turn on, but the antique cabinet creaked open by itself, not all the way, just enough to make a faint wood-on-wood groan, and I swear, for just a second, I saw someone standing behind the slightly open door. But when I blinked, it was gone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At sunrise, everything powered back on like nothing had happened. The cabinet door was fully closed again, but my name, Darren, was scratched faintly into the inside of my bedroom door. In that same sharp cursive script, I called the landlord that day. He insisted no one else had ever lived there with my name. When I mentioned the cabinet, he got quiet and said, "Yeah, some tenants thought it was haunted or whatever, but it's part of the unit, legally can't be removed. It's in the structure." I didn't know what to make of that. I tried to rationalize everything. Maybe it was some kind of psychological suggestion. But the next few nights, the sounds got louder, the dreams more vivid. I began seeing myself in the reflections, not my normal reflection, but an older, paler version, staring blankly with eyes too wide. It would blink after I did. One night, I fell asleep on the couch and woke up to knocking. 3 slow thuds. I checked the clock. 3:19 a.m. I tiptoed to the peephole. Empty hallway. But as I turned to go back to bed, I heard it, a whisper on the other side of the door. "Darren, open the door." The voice was mine. I pressed my back to the wall, shaking. The whisper came again, this time more urgent. "Let me back in." Stayed there for hours, frozen until the sun rose. The next day, I packed what I could and left. I never went back, but a week later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a key. The key to that apartment, and a note, same paper, same handwriting. You're not done yet. The apartment still remembers you. My name is Aaron Taylor, and I used to think horror stories were just that, stories. The kind you tell around a campfire or exaggerate for clicks online. But what happened to me last winter changed that forever. I had just moved to New Haven for a new job. It was a step up from my last position. Better pay, remote work, less chaos. But it also meant starting over in a new city where I didn't know anyone. I spent the first few weeks living out of a hotel while I apartment hunted, and eventually found a small but clean one-bedroom unit in an older brownstone on Elm Street. It was the second-floor rear apartment, a narrow space with high ceilings, and a view of nothing but brick walls and tangled fire escapes. The building was probably over 100 years old, with uneven floors and creaky wood beneath the carpet. But it had character. I told myself that a few strange noises were a fair trade-off for privacy and charm. The landlord, a woman named Celia, seemed polite enough, but something about her smile felt brittle, like she was holding something back. When she handed me the keys, she said, "The heat gets a little spotty in the closet. Just keep the door open at night. Helps circulation." I didn't think much of it. The place was cold, sure, but it was December, and the drafty old windows didn't help. I set up my space, got my work laptop going, and by the third day, I was fully moved in. That's when I noticed the smell. It came from the bedroom closet, a deep, narrow thing, tucked into the corner behind a crooked sliding door. At first, it was subtle, like old fabric, or the kind of damp mildew you get in basements. I figured it was dust from the carpeting, or maybe stale insulation behind the walls. But by the end of that week, it got stronger, sharper. It wasn't the smell of mold anymore. Not exactly. There was something sweet about it, like rotting fruit or overripe meat. I bought dehumidifiers, scrubbed the inside of the closet, even left bowls of baking soda and vinegar inside to try and absorb the odor. Nothing worked. I started sleeping with the closet door open, like Celia had suggested, just to keep the air moving. But that only made it worse. The smell got stronger at night, and it seemed to spread, seeping into my bedsheets, my clothes, even my skin. I'd wake up, gagging sometimes, the taste of metal on my tongue. Then things started moving. It began with small stuff. My keys weren't where I left them. My shoes flipped the wrong direction. Socks missing. At first, I blamed myself. I was tired, stressed, adjusting to a new place. But one morning, I found my watch lying inside the closet. Even though I never put anything in there. It was placed neatly on the top shelf, like someone had set it there. Deliberately, I stood there for a long time, just staring at it, the back of my neck cold. The closet was dark and still, but the smell was almost unbearable now. Like something had died deep inside the walls, and no one had ever found it. I contacted Celia and told her I thought there might be a dead animal in the wall. She sighed, like she'd heard it before. "I'll have maintenance take a look," she said. No one came. A few nights later, I woke up to the sound of breathing. At first, I thought it was my own. I was groggy, half dreaming, the room dimly lit by the glow of my laptop screen. But the sound wasn't coming from me. It was slow, raspy, wet, in and out, labored. It was coming from the closet. I sat up and stared at the opening. The door was wide, the inside black beyond the reach of the hallway light. I couldn't see anything, but the smell was there again, stronger than ever. It felt like it was coating the inside of my throat. I didn't move. I couldn't. The breathing went on for what felt like a full minute. Then, silence. The next morning, I found the closet door closed. Not just halfway. In a way, it never did on its own. My hands were shaking when I reached out and slid it open. Inside. The smell had changed. It wasn't just rot anymore. It was coppery, thick, like fresh blood. And beneath that, something worse. Something old, ancient, like the scent of something that had been hidden too long. I think there's an animal, or mold, or something dangerous. I need someone to come now. Her tone shifted immediately. You didn't touch the floorboards, did you? What? Inside the closet, she said. You didn't peel anything up, right? I hadn't, but now I wanted to. That night, I got a utility knife and pulled back the old carpet inside the closet. Beneath it was a warped piece of plywood, nailed down unevenly. The nails were rusted and old. The edges had small scratches, deep ones, like something had clawed at it over and over again. I pried it open. The smell hit me like a wave. I dropped back onto the floor, gagging. My eyes watered instantly. I turned away and dry heaved into my sink. When I finally worked up the nerve to look again, I saw that the space beneath the floor wasn't a crawl space or storage compartment. It was hollowed out about 3 feet deep, lined with old plaster and black rot. Inside was something wrapped in heavy, waxy fabric, layers of it. Whatever was underneath, it was human-shaped. I backed away, hands trembling, heart in my throat. I called 911. The police came, and for a few hours, I felt like I was finally getting answers. But then the tone shifted. The officers looked confused. One of them, a younger guy, kept shaking his head as he leaned over the hole. Then he turned to me and said, "There's nothing here." "What do you mean?" "There's no body, no smell, no wrapped fabric, just insulation and old wiring." I stepped forward to look, and sure enough, the hole was empty. Just yellowed insulation, cobwebs, dust. I stammered, "I swear there was something." I touched it. They left not long after. Said maybe I had a gas leak or a carbon monoxide issue. Even though the detectors were fine, Celia never returned my calls after that. But here's the part that still keeps me up. That night, as I lay in bed, I saw something in the closet. Not fully. Just a shape, crouched, unmoving, too tall to be sitting, too short to be standing. It stayed like that for hours. I couldn't close my eyes, couldn't breathe. The lights wouldn't turn on. My phone had no service. I blinked once. It was gone, but the floorboard was open again, and in the morning I found a deep, blood-colored scratch in the wall above my bed. 5 straight lines, like fingers. I packed my things that day. Whatever was in that closet, it wasn't mold, and it wasn't an animal. I drove 3 towns over, rented a room in someone's basement, and haven't stayed anywhere long-term since. But sometimes, when I lie awake in a new place, I get that same scent, faint but familiar, rotten sweetness, like something following me, waiting. My name is Daniel Pierce, and this story happened just last year in late September, when I moved into a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a building in downtown Portland. I had just finalized a breakup, quit a job I hated, and was trying to start fresh. The apartment wasn't anything fancy, just a 1-bedroom with creaky floorboards and yellowish walls that looked like they'd absorbed decades of cigarette smoke. But it was cheap, and the landlord seemed eager to get it off his hands. Looking back now, that eagerness makes a lot more sense. The first time I viewed the unit, I noticed the lighting had a weird flicker. Just the overhead bulbs, the kitchen light in particular. I chalked it up to old wiring. The landlord, a man named Gene, brushed it off. That word, stabilize, stuck with me for some reason. It wasn't a normal word to use, but I ignored it. I needed a place, and the rent was lower than any other 1-bedroom I'd seen in the area. I signed a lease that day and moved in 3 days later. The first 2 nights were fine, uneventful even. The unit was quiet, almost too quiet. Footsteps from upstairs. No hallway traffic, no slamming doors. Just a kind of oppressive stillness, like the whole building was wrapped in cotton. It was the third night when the lights started turning on. I was in bed by around midnight, scrolling my phone, and eventually drifted off. At 3:33 a.m., exactly, because I checked my phone, the overhead kitchen light clicked on. Not a flicker, not a surge. A clean, audible click, followed by full brightness leaking under my bedroom door. I froze. At first, I thought I might have left it on, but I always turned everything off before bed. I live alone, and I'm meticulous about lights, partly from habit, partly to keep my electric bill low. I got out of bed, slowly, my ears straining in the silence. No footsteps, no creaks, just that low electrical hum that seemed to vibrate. Through the floor, I opened the bedroom door and peeked into the kitchen. The light was on. No one was there. I turned it off, stood still for a while, then went back to bed. I didn't sleep well. I kept checking the ceiling, expecting the light to come on again. It didn't. Not that night. But the next night, the same thing happened. 3:33 a.m. The kitchen light flipped on again. I checked the switch, even unscrewed the bulb, thinking it might be faulty wiring, but there was no sign of shorts or issues. No flickers this time either. Just that same deliberate click. The third night, the bathroom light came on instead. Same exact time, 3:33 a.m. By then, I was sure someone was messing with me. I installed a cheap motion sensor camera, one of those plug-in models that connects to your phone and alerts you when it detects movement. I pointed it at the living room, aimed toward the hallway where both the kitchen and bathroom were visible. I didn't expect anything to happen. I assumed it was faulty wiring after all. Maybe a surge pattern. Something explainable. But that night, I got an alert. The timestamp was 3:33 a.m. The light came on. The hallway won this time. And the camera picked up nothing. No motion. No figure. Just light flooding the hallway. But here's the thing. I watched the video frame by frame. Right before the light turned on, the image glitched just for a single frame. It went completely black for a split second, then resumed with the hallway bathed in light dot. No human interference. No motion trigger. I checked the rest of the footage. All of it was normal. Until 3:33. It happened every night after that. Different rooms, same time. Sometimes 2 lights at once. I started staying up just to watch it happen. There was no sound, no visible cause. The light would just click on, always at 3:33, and stay on until I turned it off myself. After a week, I started noticing something even more disturbing. The bulbs weren't hot. That might sound small, but you don't think about it until you realize how wrong it is. When you turn on a light and it stays on for a while, the bulb gets warm. These lights stayed on for hours, and when I touched them, nothing, cold, not warm, not neutral. Cold, like they hadn't been used in days. That's when the headaches started, not regular headaches, not behind the eyes or in the temples. These were deep, hollow throbs in the base of my skull, as if something was pulling outward from the back of my head. They always came around the same time in the hours leading up to 3:33. Sometimes I'd get dizzy and lose track of time. One night, I remember blinking at 2:48 a.m. and suddenly it was 3:31. I'd lost nearly 45 minutes. I started leaving the apartment during those hours, trying to break the pattern. I'd go on walks, sit at a 24-hour diner, or just drive around. But even when I wasn't home, the lights would still turn on. I tested it. I set up the motion cam again, plugged in a second one, too, this time pointing at the bathroom. I left the apartment and drove out of the city, parked in a grocery store lot, and watched from my phone at exactly 3:33. Both cameras caught it. The lights turned on, but this time there was something new, something I can barely explain. In the second camera, right after the bathroom light comes on, the mirror on the wall reflects something. Just a flicker, not a shape exactly, more like a distortion. As if the air inside the mirror bent like heat waves on asphalt. And then the glitch again. One frame, black. Then normal, the motion sensor didn't trigger. I called an electrician the next morning. He came by, checked the wiring, opened the breaker, and even looked at the panel on the floor below me. Everything was clean. No evidence of power surges. He even replaced the switches for good measure. I asked if the lights could be on some kind of timer. There's no programmable system in this unit, and it's not smart-wired. That night, I disconnected the entire apartment from the breaker. Everything went dark, fully dead. But at 3:33, the lights still turned on. I stood in the dark hallway, the breaker off in the closet beside me, and watched, helpless as the kitchen light flickered to life. No power, no explanation. Cold bulb, silence, and that same feeling like something was behind me, just barely out of reach. After that, I stopped sleeping altogether. I began noticing more subtle things. Drawers slightly open, the bathroom mirror wiped clean after I'd left streaks on it the night before. My toothbrush moved. Once, I found the shower running, just trickling, but it had been dry when I went to bed. I finally decided to break the lease. I told the landlord I was leaving, no matter what penalty I had to pay. He didn't argue, not even a little. Just said, "I get it." When I asked if anything strange had happened before I moved in, he hesitated. "There've been complaints," he said, "but nothing that made sense. The last guy just stopped answering his phone, left his stuff behind, wouldn't return my calls. I eventually changed the locks. I asked his name. He looked at the lease papers, then said, "Daniel Pierce." I blinked. "That's my name." He looked up at me, pale. He muttered, "I know." Asterisk. I stood there, frozen, staring at Jean like he'd just spoken in another language. "What do you mean, you know?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, man, sometimes paperwork gets crossed. The system prints out names from previous leases. I just assumed it was a mistake. But you didn't say anything when I signed." He avoided my eyes. "It's not my job to keep track of the coincidences. You wanted the place. You signed." I should have pushed harder, but I didn't. I didn't want to hear the answer I knew was coming. Something about the way he said it, like he'd heard my name before, in a way that had nothing to do with forms. That night, my last night in the apartment, I decided to record everything. I brought in a third camera and positioned it to capture my bedroom. I wanted a full picture of what happened to prove to myself that I wasn't going crazy. I even set up a fourth camera in the hallway just outside the apartment, pointed at my door. The final setup was simple. All cameras synced to my phone. My apartment had no power. I had shut off the breaker myself, locked the box. I even taped over the switches to be sure. Then I waited. It was almost worse knowing what was coming. The anticipation crawled over my skin like a cold sweat I couldn't shake. I sat on my mattress, fully clothed, my back against the headboard. Watching the time on my phone ticked closer and closer to 3 minutes, 33 seconds, 3 milliseconds, 1 dot. My phone flickered. I thought it was just bad signal. But then I noticed the cameras disconnected. One by one. Pop, pop, pop. The feeds dropped out. All except the hallway cam.3:3 2 dot. I watched the hallway feed in silence. Nothing moved. Nothing stirred. 3:33 dot. Every light in my apartment turned on. But that wasn't the worst part. The hallway camera, the one outside my door, showed something else entirely. At exactly 3:33, my apartment door slowly opened. Not wide, just a few inches. Enough for a dark space to reveal itself, darker than the hallway. Impossibly so. The kind of black that feels full, like it isn't the absence of light, but the presence of something else. And then something stepped out. It wasn't a person. I don't know what it was, but I swear it wasn't walking. It moved in small bursts, like each frame of the footage was skipping. Or it existed in half steps, like reality couldn't fully render it. It had no distinguishable features, just a black silhouette, rippling and wrong. Like smoke trapped in a human shape, it stood still in front of the camera, then tilted its head unnaturally far, like a curious animal, and smiled and smiled. Not a normal smile, not even a mouth. Just a widening gash of white that appeared where no mouth should have been. Teeth, dozens of them, too long, too thin, like shards of glass curling back into its cheeks. And then the feed cut to static. I ran. I didn't even grab my things. Just my phone, my keys, and I bolted down the hallway, barefoot, heart jackhammering in my chest. The hallway felt longer. The exit sign at the far end kept blinking, and the air grew thick, humid, and buzzing like it was soaked in electricity. When I hit the stairwell door, it wouldn't open. I slammed against it, jamming my shoulder, twisting the knob so hard I thought it would snap. Then, behind me, footsteps, slow, barefoot, wet. They were deliberate, each step echoing far louder than it should have in that narrow hall. I turned and looked. There was no one there, but the lights behind me were turning off one by one, starting from my apartment door and creeping toward me. Click, 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 with every light that shut off. The air felt tighter, like something massive was pushing into the hallway. Unseen dot, finally, the stairwell door gave, and I sprinted down 3 flights like a madman, stumbling, barely catching myself on the railing. I slept in my car that night. The next morning, I went back with Gene to collect my things. He didn't ask why I left in such a hurry. He just handed me a trash bag and said, "Get what you need. Don't take your time." Dead. Cold. The kind of cold that settles in your lungs and stays there. None of the lights worked anymore, even when we turned the breaker back on. Nothing happened. Gene stood in the doorway and said nothing while I collected my wallet, some clothes, and my camera gear. I asked him if anyone had died here. He didn't answer, but as I left, he said, "Don't watch the hallway footage. Just delete it." I never told him I had a backup cloud save. I didn't listen. I watched it again later that night. At a friend's place, the hallway footage cuts to static at 3:34. But before it does, just before the image vanishes, that thing, whatever it is, walks right up to the lens and reaches toward the screen. It taps it 3 times. Then the smile splits wider than before. The screen flickers, and the last thing the camera captures is my door closing slowly behind it. I still have the video. I won't upload it. I won't share it, because sometimes I still see that static dot. Sometimes my phone flickers at 3:33 a.m. And sometimes, cut, the lights turn on, even though I don't live there anymore.